There needs to be a strategic change for the good of all people, all decent people in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. That strategic change needs to be a world without Hamas using the Gaza Strip as a staging ground for terrorism.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, spokesperson for the IDF. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We're hearing this morning, Peter Lerner, that some Israeli forces have gone into Gaza overnight. Our correspondent talked about some video he saw of tanks going in and then possibly coming out again. What can you tell us about what's actually happened?
Good morning. Day 20 of our war against Hamas, and indeed the operation is broadening in its effectiveness. Last night we conducted clearing operations in order to remove potential threats that could impede on a ground operation that is potentially coming. The forces targeted Hamas positions, engaged with Hamas anti-tank squad, and indeed the idea is to remove all threats that could potentially disrupt the military operation. It is part of our ongoing and our expanding of our operation, and it is indeed part of the preparations that we are taking. It was a large force, larger than we've seen but it was still localized in its efforts, in effective escapes of areas, which was limited in its scope. Tanks, infantry, under the cover of Air Force and protection of the Air Force. And indeed, there was a ground mobilization, a limited ground mobilization at that.
And how far in did you go? And were there any civilians that were seen in those areas?
I have not received any reports of civilians. It was probably around 1 kilometer, maybe just a bit more.
Is it fair to say that that you talked about day 20 war against Hamas, that your operation is against Hamas, it's not against the Palestinian people? Is that fair to say, first of all?
Absolutely. The people of Gaza are not the enemy of Israel. Hamas is the enemy of Israel.
You will have heard the interview before, because I know you were up and listening to it. Hopefully you could hear it all. What should people... I mean, this is almost an insoluble problem, because there are some people who don't want to move and who can't move. And I know that you've told them that they should move. There are 130 premature babies, Fikr was telling us. There are people who are on kidney dialysis machines and they just can't move. What should they do? What should those babies do?
I didn't hear her say that Hamas should release 222 hostages that they are holding unlawfully after the action of brutally massacring over 1,400 Israelis. That was one point. Our call to people to evacuate from the north to go to south is a call to get people out of harm's way. We're continuing to call that, and we're continuing to encourage, while Hamas is actually trying to discourage people.
Yes.
And indeed, when we're relating to issues like hospitals need to be protected. But if people are holding up in the courtyard of a hospital and a struggle takes place nearby, not as the hospital is target, and debris flies through the sky and lands in the courtyard, people in that courtyard can be hurt.
Yes.
So that is why we're saying we won't target the hospital. The hospital will not be a target. Of course, they're protected under international humanitarian law and the laws of armed conflict, unless they are abused for terrorist activity. And that is also stipulated in international humanitarian law.
Yeah, Peter Lerner, I think of course. Now, I think the point she was making was that because of the running down of fuel, electricity, supplies, etc., that's why she was concerned about people who are linked up to machines, kidney dialysis machines, and premature babies. So at some point, those machines are going to stop working, and then those people, those children, are in mortal danger. And I suppose my question to you is, I understand exactly what you're saying. 1,400 people murdered by Hamas, 220 hostages, still don't know where they are, what kind of condition they are, whether we're going to see them alive again. We understand all of that. I'm just asking about these very vulnerable people. What should happen to them? What will happen to them?
The vast majorities of hospitals in Gaza are hospitals run by Hamas. Hamas chooses not to distribute the fuel to those hospitals. the question should be asked not to the IDF, who is fighting a war against a brutal, merciless organization that has no regard for human life, but this question you should refer to Hamas. Why are you distributing the fuel that you have stockpiled and continue to stockpile to the hospitals that need it, to the pumping stations so that water can get to the people that are in dire need? This isn't a war that Israel chose. Israel was forced to defend itself against this merciless terrorist organization that will come into our houses and came into our houses and butchered babies in their bedrooms. So while I understand, and I'm seeing and watching, like you, the images, the dramatic images coming out from Gaza,
yes,
we can't give Hamas a free pass. They are the ruling government of the Gaza Strip. They are the governing authority of the Gaza Strip. It is their responsibility to deal with the people of Gaza. It is their responsibility to alleviate the problems. They claim that they are the protectors of the people, but they are in effect sacrificing them. Just one more example, when we're encouraging people to leave from areas where we're intending to target, they're telling them, threatening them to stay. And when people aren't listening to them because they realize that the situation on the ground has changed. We've never endured an attack with 1,400 people murdered. And so people realize that what happened is a strategic change for Hamas.
Okay.
And they're trying to listen to our encouragement for them to leave. And Hamas is putting physical barriers.
Yeah. Well, these people, and everything you say is true. Then these people are stuck. They are victims of two situations. Peter Lerner, I want to ask you just one more question, if I may. These people who are leaving, are able to leave, who you want to leave, where should they go, and for how long should they stay there?
It is a temporary measure, and we announced that it's a temporary measure to get them out of harm's way.
How temporary, though? Months, weeks, years?
Once we mobilize and once we take control, then the situation will be under security control. A new security reality will be on the ground, and then we will announce when they will be able to come back. Hopefully, it'll be as short as possible. Of course, that we can't guarantee that at this time. And they should go south because the south is safer. It's not 100% because Hamas continued to launch rockets from the south towards Israel. This is the challenge, and it is a huge challenge for any military in the world trying to operate based on the three principles of the laws of armed conflict, whether it's distinction between civilians and non-combatants and the terrorists, or identifying the military necessity and then weighing up the proportionality of the influence the strike will have while we're trying to take care of that threat. Indeed, there needs to be, and this is, I think, is the most important understanding that the world needs to embrace. There needs to be a strategic change for the good of all people, all decent people in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. That strategic change needs to be a world without Hamas using the Gaza Strip as a staging ground for terrorism. Okay, Peter Lerner, thank you. That's Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. He is spokesperson for the IDF.